Welcome to Mr. Strawman. Today, 2 new stories await you. Stories that will make your blood run cold. I found a shocking tape in my father's old video camera. Asha and Finley are packing up their things while I'm writing this. My wife and son are convinced I've gone insane. And honestly, I'm okay with them thinking that. They're definitely not going to watch this recording themselves. That won't necessarily keep them safe from what I've just seen on the tape, or from what might still be here in the house. My father took his own life on my 7th birthday, leaving gaps in my recollections. My memory didn't really start functioning properly again until I left the old house. People have told me that's normal. They've explained that the constant, stormy black cloud in my mind is my brain's way of handling trauma. They've said my memories might not be gone. They could just be locked away, hidden behind some mental door. I have a feeling this tape just forced that door open. Last year, my mother passed away and left me the family home. Finley was excited to move into Grandma's old place, maybe as a way to feel close to her, so I agreed. I didn't know what was waiting on those tapes, or maybe I simply didn't remember. We've only been here a few weeks. Today I was rummaging through the attic, sorting Mom's belongings into piles for keep and discard, when I stumbled across the old family camcorder. I plugged it in, and to my astonishment, it powered up, despite nearly 3 decades of neglect. The recording started in 1995, at my 6th birthday. A couple of my friends were clustered around the kitchen table, staring hungrily at a cake iced with "Happy Birthday, Jordan." Mom was holding the camera while Dad prepared to cut the cake, and I suppose the camera isn't working properly after all. That was the first thing that struck me, because peeking from just behind Dad, mirroring every slice of cake he made, was another Dad. And this is the moment when the author of the story started to reveal really disturbing, unsettling details. It was as if my father had stepped into an endless mirror, a reflection stretching off to the side and behind him. I half expected other copies stretching into infinity, but there were only 2, one in front, one behind. My first thought was that it had to be some kind of glitch. The camera had spent decades in a cardboard box, coated in dust, its gears rusting away. Then I caught the clone's face, and my mind froze. This wasn't a perfect copy. Its limbs matched my father's movements exactly, but its face, it was completely wrong. It was crumpled, malformed, more like balled-up paper than flesh. The folds were too deep, too rigid, too grotesque to belong to any human. All its features were buried except for the lips, which quivered in pure rage. This second Dad looked twisted and alien, but the contours were far too sharp and detailed for it to be a recording error. A heaviness crept into my own limbs, as if my arms and legs were growing folds of their own. Fear pinned me to the landing's floorboards. I couldn't move, couldn't blink, only stare. The footage jumped to December. I was perched at the base of the Christmas tree in a red reindeer onesie, unwrapping gifts with my little brother. My chest tightened as something stirred in the branches, but 6-year-old me didn't notice. He was too wrapped up in the shiny paper and ribbons. Then I saw it. A red sleeve, patterned with reindeer just like mine, stretching out from the pine boughs toward him. It wanted me, just as my father's duplicate had wanted him. What the? I heard my mother's voice behind the camera. When the video skipped forward, my heart never settled. It thumped in my throat and buzzed in my ears. It was 1996, and I was sitting at a park table with my parents. The camera rested somewhere on the table, pointed squarely at us three. I remembered this. Why did this moment linger in my memory when the rest of my childhood remained blank? Dad looked off. There was only one of him this time, yet his skin was almost ghostly pale. He seemed unwell. Little Jordan was too absorbed in his sandwich to notice, but Mum's eyes were sharp. She could tell something wasn't right. She tried to mask it, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's Jordan's 7th birthday," she said, voice a little too bright. "Oh, God, say something funny for the camera, Daddy." He stared straight at the lens, as if catching sight of me decades later, but no words came. My mother's smile trembled. She leaned back on the bench, glancing just past him, searching for something, perhaps that other presence that sometimes lingered behind him. That second face. "You're okay, right?" she whispered. "You said being away from the house would help, that you'd be yourself again." Then Dad moved with a speed that made me nearly drop the camera. His hands wrapped around Mum's neck, and I screamed. Both in the memory and in the present. From behind a nearby tree, an arm shot out, clad in a short-sleeved top identical to little Jordan's. The thing from the Christmas tree had returned. Its hand floated in the air, guiding my younger self to wipe away his tears and stay put. He obeyed, turning cold and blank like Dad, who was attacking Mum. But just as her life was about to slip away, my father froze, distracted by some sudden, inexplicable impulse. I know exactly why this moment sticks in my memory. He straightened, and Mum reached over, cradling my younger self in her nearly lifeless arms. Then Dad rummaged through the picnic basket and pulled out a kitchen knife, presumably meant for cutting the cake. But he didn't use it on Mum, on little Jordan, or even the cake. Instead, he directed the blade to himself. And then... This was the day that author tried to wipe from his memory, but finally it all came back. I let the camera slip from my hands, and an oppressive weight crashed onto my shoulders, back, arms, and legs. But this wasn't something I could simply shake off. Even as I tried to stand, I felt a force dragging me down. Something that had been lingering just behind me ever since Asha and Finley moved into my childhood home. Something I had buried deep in the fog of my early years before I left that place. Before I left. It hit me too late. My family wasn't safe here. I glanced at the mirror hanging on the wall behind me, and, as I had with my father, I saw the start of infinity. Just over my shoulder, to the right, stood a version of me with a twisted, crumpled face. I didn't remember it sticking this close before, but I had forgotten so much from those early, hazy years. I opened my mouth to scream, but a hand clamped over it, and searing pain flared as my copy pressed its clay-like fingers against my mouth. I pulled at the hand, crying out. As I staggered across the upstairs landing, Finley appeared at the bottom of the stairs just then. In an instant, the clone vanished. But I saw it reflected in my 10-year-old son's eyes. Pure terror. He had glimpsed something behind me, even if only for a heartbeat. "Dad, what was—" "Pack your things," I cut him off, my jaw still stinging from that thing's grip. "Now." And that brings us here. I'm hunched heavily in the doorway, one foot already over the threshold, forcing my family forward. My chest feels tight. We have to leave. Asha keeps asking about the raw burns around my mouth, but there's no way to explain it, and Finley just stares at me with haunted eyes. All I can do is get him and his mother out of this house. Hopefully, the thing will release me once we're far enough away, just like it did when I left as a boy. My mind will clear, and maybe this nightmare will end. I won't end up like my father. In the second story, a little boy witnessed something incomprehensible and very frightening. In Ferris. Has anyone else ever had a moment where a piece of technology itself, not a show or a game, but the physical device, felt deeply wrong in a way you couldn't explain? I don't even know if this counts, but when I was a kid, I became convinced the television in my room wasn't normal. I didn't laugh about it or tell my friends. I actually tried to explain it to my mom and dad. Around the time I turned 8, I'd become obsessed with catching certain shows whenever they aired: Dexter's Laboratory or the Powerpuff Girls, and even a couple I definitely wasn't supposed to watch, like South Park and Aqua Teen Hunger Force. It didn't take long before this drove my mom crazy. She preferred her soap operas and those overly dramatic made-for-TV films. So one afternoon, completely out of the blue, she took me to a small pawn shop nearby, grabbed the cheapest television she could find, less than $50, and told me it was a reward for my good grades. I was a straight A student in second grade, so I was thrilled. It felt like the ultimate prize. When we brought it home and set it up in my bedroom, she left me alone with it. Of course, I immediately started inspecting every detail. The only branding anywhere on the frame was a logo stamped across the front: In Ferris. Printed in thick, simple lettering that almost looked like a legitimate electronics brand. Years later, when I remembered all of this, I tried searching for the exact model online. I couldn't find the model number. Actually, I couldn't find any trace of the brand at all. No records, no archived listings, nothing. The best explanation I've come up with is that it was some off-brand knockoff, but even that thought gives me chills. There wasn't a remote, so I sat on the floor for hours, pressing every physical button on the TV, scrolling through every menu option I could access. I adjusted the brightness and color settings, pretending I was unlocking strange, alternate universe versions of my favorite cartoons. Eventually, though, I found something labeled Demo Mode. That's when the memory stops feeling nostalgic and starts feeling unsettling. When I activated it, the screen displayed a wide, open field, but not the bright, colorful scenery you usually see in store demo loops. The sky was dull and overcast. The grass looked brittle and dead. Power lines stretched across the horizon in the distance. It resembled those lonely rural highways you pass through in late fall, where everything feels quiet and abandoned. Across the image, there was text in that blocky, old-school VCR-style font everyone remembers. Discover your inner vision in Ferris. Behind the words on the screen, there was also a soft instrumental track playing, generic, gentle background music like you'd hear in a waiting room. When I was little, I actually found it calming. The scenery felt oddly familiar to me. Growing up in rural New Hampshire, the empty fields, the muted sky, the tune itself was pleasant. I didn't even know what the slogan meant at the time, but it still came across as reassuring. After a while, I started leaving the demo mode running when I went to bed, the same way I used to fall asleep to my favorite VHS tapes. The difference was, this screen never switched over to that blank blue background after sitting idle. That empty blue glow always made me uneasy. It still does. Before long, it became part of my routine. Once I finished playing Halo 2 or watching cartoons, I'd switch over to the demo display and let it run while I drifted off. I did this for months. Every morning, I'd wake up to find the TV turned off. My mom must have come in sometime during the night and powered it down. But one night, in the thick heat of late summer, I realized the demo wasn't as harmless as I'd believed. The author lived with this eerie TV for about a year before all the most disturbing events started happening. I was 9 then. Swine flu had been spreading everywhere, and I was unlucky enough to catch it. Each day I felt worse, and eventually I could hardly sleep at all. I remember that night vividly. My mom drew me a warm bath with Epsom salt, gave me some melatonin, tucked the blankets snugly around me, and turned on what had become my nightly comfort, the infrared demo screen. Except sleep just wouldn't come. I lay there staring, my eyes drifting between the glow of the television and the red numbers on my digital clock. 10 turned into 11, 11 into midnight. Midnight crawled to 1, then 2, then 3 in the morning. My eyelids felt heavy, but real sleep stayed out of reach. I kept rereading the infrared demo message again and again, almost trying to hypnotize myself into rest. Then, suddenly, the message disappeared. The soft background music cut off too. At first, there was only a faint ambient hiss. Then I heard it, footsteps crunching across brittle grass. I pushed myself upright in bed. Any trace of exhaustion vanished. My eyes locked onto the small 20-inch CRT at the far end of my room. A figure stepped into frame. I think it was a man. At least, it had that build. He was dressed for cold weather, completely out of place for the scene, wearing a dark autumn jacket and gloves. His head was covered with a balaclava, only his eyes visible through the narrow opening. He reached forward and picked up the camera, and the perspective shifted to his point of view. Then he started walking away from the open field and into a dense stretch of trees. The footage moved steadily as he pushed deeper into the woods. It felt like he walked forever, at least an hour, without ever speaking. The only sounds were wind in the branches, the crunch of leaves under his boots, and the slow rhythm of his breathing. The horrific events that followed were definitely not for children's eyes. I was frozen in place, staring at the screen. I didn't understand what I was watching, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I felt afraid, though I couldn't explain why. More than anything, I had this overwhelming sense that I was witnessing something I wasn't supposed to see. Eventually, he came to a stop. The camera tilted downward as he set it on the ground. From that angle, all that was visible were scattered leaves and the lower halves of tree trunks stretching upward. He walked out of frame. His footsteps grew fainter and fainter until everything went nearly silent. Then it started. A sharp, piercing scream cut through the quiet, followed by rough grunting and the frantic rustling of leaves. The noises overlapped in a chaotic blur. After a while, the screaming weakened into soft, broken whimpers. The struggle sound slowed, replaced by heavy, labored breathing. Several minutes later, he returned. Suddenly, the camera jerked upward, and now his face filled the frame. The balaclava was gone, revealing a wide, unsettling grin. His eyes sparkled with a strange intensity, almost as if he were thrilled by something I couldn't comprehend. He pressed the camera close, speaking fast in a language that sounded alien. His tone oddly energetic, almost gleeful. He took a few deliberate steps, holding up his fingers as if counting silently. 3, 2, 1. When he reached 1, he swung the camera forward again, pointing it toward whatever was ahead. For a fleeting moment, I could just barely make out the scene. Then the screen went completely dark, shutting off with a sudden sharp click. I froze on my bed, heart hammering, mouth agape, eyes locked on the blank display. I couldn't fully process it, but I knew I had just witnessed someone being hurt. Real, not like the over-the-top fight scenes in my dad's action movies. There was nothing thrilling or cinematic about it. A chill ran straight through me as I tried to replay the last frame in my mind before the screen faded to black. I was sure, without a shadow of doubt, that I had seen a body, because for the first time ever, while using demo mode, a color had appeared on the screen that I had never seen before. Red. It was Mr. Strawman, and remember, some stories follow you home.